Good afternoon and good morning, and welcome to APRI's webinar on climate change adaptation in Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, on strategies, initiatives, and practices of locally led adaptation. We're very honored to have you here today. We know that you're joining us from various parts of the world. We would like to say our sincere thanks on behalf of APRI and on behalf of all the researchers and all the organizations that have been part of these 2 years process of trying to understand some of the things that are happening within West Africa in terms of locally led adaptation initiatives, actions, practices, and also strategies to address the growing impacts of climate change. Today, we are honored to have our 3 researchers from Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal to present to us some of the key findings that we've managed to come up with as a result of these research and engagement with key stakeholders. I'll start with Eloka, who is from Nigeria. Dr. Eloka Okeke is from Nigeria and his case studies, for example, focused on energy, fish farming, and aqua and land degradation to go deep into understanding what local communities are doing. I'll move then to Albert Ain, who is based in Ghana. We'll also be talking to us about the key findings from Ghana and also highlighting some of the case studies that he looked at in the agriculture, waste management, and coastal erosion and flooding. Last but not least, we'll move to Dr. Ibrahima Sey, who is joining us from Senegal. Ibrahima will present his key findings and learnings from the project, but also highlight the health and agriculture coastal erosion case studies that he looked at. Without further ado, I would like to again welcome you and kindly ask you to actively participate by sending your questions through the chat so we can be able to have a more engaged discussion during the panel session. Before I forget, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Grace Bungu, and I head the Climate Change Program at APRI. Thank you so much. And without wasting any more time, we'd like to welcome our first presenter from Nigeria, Dr. Eloka Okeke. Welcome, please.
Thank you very much, Grace. Thank you for the panelists here present. Thank you, everyone, wherever you're listening from. So I'll be sharing my slide on and just like Grace said, I'll be looking at the locally led adaptation actions in Nigeria. The title is Unlocking Adaptation Potential, Insights into Nigeria's Climate Change Policies, Initiatives, and Local Actions. And as a context, we'll be looking at the socio-economic profile of Nigeria. Nigeria is a very population of Nigeria is quite big at the moment, about more than 200 people at the moment. And with our population comes many socio-economic challenges. The debt profile is rising, yes, quickly. And then the agroecological landscape is very, diverse and complex. In the north, we have desertification, while in the south, we have many forms of flooding and water-related hazards, saltwater intrusion, and displacing millions of people. And at the center is where everything, the melting pot is at the center, where we have the northerners trying to come down because green spaces are being eroded, and the southerners also trying to see how they will manage the green spaces. So this melting pot leads to farmer header crisis, and food prices have been skyrocketing. Now we also have many climate change impacts, and our vulnerability indices is increasing. Just like I mentioned earlier, rainfall has been very variable these days. We have weather-related disaster that has been increasing. Yet, Nigeria has been doing very well. The federal government, they've come up with a lot of actions on, a lot of climate actions. And they've also, like other countries, they've developed many adaptation policy frameworks, like the Climate Change Act, the updated NDC, the National Adaptation Plan Framework, the NASPA-CCN, LTV, that's long-term vision, and also the NDB. All these have been very, all these adaptation policy frameworks have been, going very well for Nigeria. But its population, with its dwindling economy, has made a lot of things, very difficult for the country. And this is why this research is very, very important, not just for Nigeria, for other countries around West Africa, which we are now looking at the context between Ghana. We'll be looking at Ghana. We'll be also looking at Nigeria and then Senegal. Nigeria has a very robust adaptation policy landscape. They've developed a lot of adaptation policy frameworks. We have the Nigerian Adaptation Plan Framework. We have the NASPA-CCN. We have the ADCOM. We have the recently Nigeria Climate Change Act. We have the NCCP, the updated nationally determined contributions, and many more. Yet, it seems that there are many problems associated with all this, in as much as we have many of them. One, the Nigerian government has made concerted efforts to increase adaptation action in 13 priority sectors. So Nigeria has developed 13 priority sectors. Apologies for that. And then we discovered that NASPA-CCN, the ADCOM, NAPF, and NCCPRS have well-structured adaptation strategies, policies, and action plans that cover these priority sectors. However, one thing the government is lacking at the moment, which is very obvious, is access. Access to adaptation finance, which has limited the implementation of these adaptation policies and action plans. Also, these policies are partially aligned. Majority of them are partially aligned with obvious implementation gaps. The government have done a lot. We have the Department of Climate Change, and they have done a lot to, come up with this adaptation policy frameworks. But we still see some misalignment within the frameworks. And lastly, local actors, which are very, very important in adaptation, do not have agency over adaptation actions, especially in design and implementation stage. Now, after seeing all this, we dive deep into local communities. We studied 3 communities here. Number 1 is on energy, that is biogas production for forest conservation in Nigeria. We looked at the narratives and voices from smallholder farming communities. And then we also looked at climate change adaptation strategies in the fisheries and aquaculture sector of Nigeria, what their challenges are and how they have been adapting and coping. And finally, we looked at the adaptive capacities of rural communities to land degradation in southeastern Nigeria. We looked at the lessons we learned from them and opportunities for scale-up. All these case studies and the communities are located, they are very well spread. And what we did when we are trying to bring this together is we looked at the main priority sectors in Nigeria, which are mostly agriculture. Agriculture is one of the things that Nigeria needs very well to increase its exports, balance its import-export nexus. Then another thing is fisheries, and then energy. Nigerian forest is depleting very fast, and with this withdrawing population, energy is very, very important, especially in the rural community, where wood felling has been occurring at a rapid rate. Then natural disasters in terms of land degradation is also another important thing that has been eating up arable land in the northern and southeastern regions of Nigeria, and also we looked at them. Now, we've discovered that, one, most of these communities, they are motivated by the need to sustain their means of livelihoods. They have access to efficient, clean, and sustainable energy sources, improve their health and well-being, and other associated co-benefits. These are just a few key points that we have to put here. Then number two, the communities practice robust monitoring, evaluation, learning, and knowledge sharing. Remember that most of these communities, they whatever they're doing, that is, they practice informal training. So there is robust monitoring, and whatever they are learning, they are passing it on to the next generation. And within the society or the cooperative society that they form within the community. And also, they make use of effective approach that is sometimes multifaceted. For example, the fish farming, the aquaculture and fisheries sector, they drill boreholes, they use local feed to feed their fish, because the cost of using imported, feeding the fish, imported fish has been, skyrocketing, and that is not balancing their, their investment in the fish sector. So they have to, come up with a lot of strategies to be able to cope and adapt to their environment. And also their actions are limited by lack of access. This is the major thing we discovered. They have lack of access to financial services like insurance and credit facilities, like the fisheries and aquaculture sector, because they locate their industry in very lowland areas. Once there is high flooding and erratic weather events, their business gets flooded and they lose everything they have. So there is no insurance and credit facilities for them to access. And finally, there is lack of government support and adequate technical capabilities. Had they been these things are in place, they would have done very well. But these things are not very well in place. The government workers, agricultural extension people that should be visiting them are not really coming as they are expecting. Now, what are the policy recommendations? We just recommended a few here for the context of the time we are giving. One, local research and technical institutions need to partner with frontline communities in order to engage in solution-based manpower development and refinement of local products to build the resilience and reduce vulnerability. Most of the products these communities are using are found within their communities. So there need to be refinement. If we need to do upscaling, if we need to scale up what they are doing, we need to refine it very well. So there need to be a synergy or partnership between local research institutions, which are located within these communities or within the regions, and the communities themselves, the frontline communities themselves, so that they can do very well. Then local policymakers, trying to shift, local policymakers and stakeholders should improve the synergy between national and subnational government agencies to give local communities more agency over adaptation action. I just mentioned about agricultural extension workers. There is this lack of synergy. The government, the federal government seem to be doing their own thing, and at the local community, they seem to be doing a different thing altogether. So they need to come together. There need to be this uniformity in action so that the local communities will have agency over adaptation actions. Then there is need for local stakeholders to liaise more with national and international financial institutions to demand for equitable allocation of scarce climate adaptation finance. At the moment, sometimes the federal government seems to be, they don't have enough that they could even push down to the state and local level. Yet we have many international organizations, financial institutions that are coming up, but it seems that they don't have access to the local community. So there need to be this, they need to close the gap so that the local communities could be able to access these funds, which are very, very important for them to thrive and, reduce vulnerability. And finally, international communities need to partner with local communities to support local entrepreneurs, women cooperatives most especially, and play a major role in capacity building and strengthening of local institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Those that are joining us, welcome on board from wherever you're joining us from. You're listening and participating in the webinar on climate change adaptation in Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. You've just now heard from Dr. Okeke from Nigeria. We are moving on to Dr. Albert Ain, a representative and senior fellow climate change program from Ghana. Albert, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all doing well wherever you are. So, Isabella, please share the screen for me. We will be talking about the climate change adaptation in Ghana, climate adaptation strategies, initiatives, and practices. Which is part of the research that we have done. And I'll just continue from where my colleague from Nigeria left. So in the Ghanaian context, what we want to do is to highlight the centrality of locally led adaptation as a pathway in terms of what we will be able to do as far as adaptation is concerned. So I will basically be highlighting the locally led adaptation strategies and practices, and then the lessons that can inform and guide implementation of the nationally determined contributions in Ghana. Okay, so just before I go into the research processes, where is Ghana? Ghana is located in West Africa. It is made up of a population of about 31 million people, and it is administratively divided into 16 regions. So climate change is one of the key policy challenges that we are currently dealing with. Okay, so I hope you can all see the slide. As I said, I'm just presenting the findings from the research on climate change adaptation policies, strategies, and local actions in Ghana here. And just a brief background of the research. So the research had various mottos. We started with literature review and mapping of stakeholders and policies. And based on that, we done a series of stakeholder consultations. We also had NDC policies and other strategies on climate change, and then did a case studies where we explored some of the issues that I'll be presenting on. I'll be talking more about the case studies briefly. Next slide. So climate change in Ghana, as I said, Ghana is considered to be experiencing the impact of climate change, including increased temperature, including sea level rise, including uncertain rainfall patterns. As an example, all our national communications and indicators point to some of these issues. If you look at the NDCs index, Ghana is ranked 109 out of 108 countries that are considered to be highly vulnerable. And the vulnerability of climate change is seen in sectors such as agriculture, in health, in coastal resources, and particularly on natural resources. What is now known is that the impact of climate change is also likely to be modified under minimal action scenarios. For example, the mean annual temperature is projected to rise by about 4.8 degrees Celsius on average from 1990 to 2100. We expect that number of days of warm spell in Ghana is also projected to increase. And then though rainfall is generally expected to decline, the number of days with heavy precipitation is projected to rise. So these are just some of the the state or the trend, what we know about climate change in Ghana. So as a result of this, the government and the various stakeholders have come together to propose a number of or series of policies and strategies that are expected to be used to guide actions. Okay, next slide. One of the key responses to this climate change issue has been the NDCs. And within the nationally determined contribution, there are about 13 specific adaptation measures out of about 47 programs of action that the government has proposed. Key priority areas that the government is considering include building resilient infrastructure, promoting livelihood, strengthening agricultural landscape, urban planning, early warning systems, and also enhancing climate resilience, especially for women and vulnerable groups. Next slide. So in terms of these, there are some specific policies or strategies and frameworks that really guide or drive some of these actions, including the National Climate Change Master Plan. Then there's a climate change policy, there's a climate change adaptation strategy, and the National Adaptation Framework. Next slide. So some of the strategies that are emphasized within this framework includes identifying forest management resources, climate smart agriculture, crop insurance, sea defense, and also integrated water resources management. These are just few of some of the main actions that the government is promoting to tackle the issues of climate change. Next. The current approach, despite some of the progress, has some challenges. One of the challenges is limited climate finance for adaptation. If you look at climate finance inflow into the country, you only have between 2011 and 2021, only 3.4% from official sources are dedicated towards adaptation. All of the 87.4% goes into mitigation, adaptation. So it's an issue of having an imbalanced distribution of the resources between mitigation and adaptation. Local priorities are also not really adequately reflected in some of these policies. There's a weak implementation mechanism and limited coordination. There's limited community engagement and sometimes very limited localized data. And from the interactions and review of official documents, these are some of the gaps and challenges that we currently find. Next. So as a result of these challenges, we're trying to highlight the need that the adaptation response approach to emphasize on locally led adaptation. This is because what the literature now tells us is that locally led adaptation efforts are very crucial in building resilience and adaptive capacity. So using this as a start, we try to explore some 3 cases. Next slide. That locally people are really leading on a number of actions to explore the value that we can get from shifting our adaptation actions into locally led adaptation approach. The first case study was about building resilient livelihood through VLSAs, Village Savings and Loans Associations, and organic share processing. These activities, the communities themselves, groups have come together, and through the various actions they take, they are able to improve their income levels to tackle some of the effects that is caused by climate change. Now, there is another case we look at where communities have come together, employing different climate smart agriculture practices that are supporting their livelihood. Next. What we gathered from this case study is just 4 things I wanted to mention because of time. The first is that locally led adaptation provides some contextual relevance. Through the case studies, we find that local adaptation takes into account the very specific social, cultural, and economic and environmental needs of the people. And through that, it is able to become more effective approach that is tailored to people's needs than a top-down level type of adaptation approach that we currently see. We also found from the case studies that it is able to build on social capital and strengthen some co-benefit. In fact, the issue of co-benefit actually becomes one of the drivers for adaptation. core benefits here include things like improved health, improved access to other resources, includes cohesion, social cohesion, and then empowerment. Through the various case studies, we found that this is really one of the things that helps strengthen adaptation efforts. Next. The third point I wanted to mention about the value proposition of locally led adaptation has to be the cost effectiveness. Many of the actions are local. It is things people have been doing over the years. And therefore, when adaptation effort strengthens and build on this, it is much more effective in terms of in cost compared to engineering and top-down approaches that the government currently promotes. And then lastly, there's some issues about ownership and empowerment that are characterized by these actions. And so in conclusion, what we want to highlight is that there's a value for government, especially the Ghanaian government, and then the other stakeholders to really consider locally led adaptation as one of the pathways to implement their nationally determined contributions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Albert. Those that are now joining us or continuing to join us and be with us, you're listening and participating in the webinar on climate change adaptation in Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. In this webinar, we are focusing on strategies, initiatives, and practices, as well as opportunities and entry point for enhancing adaptation and other climate change actions through locally led adaptation processes and practices. Just to get you on board on what we're trying to do now before we go to the next speaker, there is a lot going on, or there's a lot that has gone on for the last 2 years in this project. The time we have here is not very much, so the researchers are just giving you a very small summary of what they have been doing in the last 2 years. After this, please visit APRI website and find some of the reports, the case studies that will be available for more details, including also reports. I would also like to bring to your attention that the researchers have also prepared policy briefs that have more summary points with the results and recommendation to policymakers and other stakeholders, which will be being published on APRI's website very soon. Without further ado, I would now like to welcome our third speaker, who is joining us from Senegal. Dr. Ibrahima Sey has been and continues to be our senior researcher climate change program, and is joining us from Senegal. So Ibrahima, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace, and good morning or good afternoon to the person who is joining us. And I would like first to thank APRI for giving us the opportunity to achieve this research on locally led adaptation in Senegal, what is a good experience for me. And now I am sharing my screen, and I would like to say that I will be more focused on the main feedings and lessons learned from the deep dives on the three area of adaptation: the area of agriculture, the area of coastal zone, and also the area of health. And I am lecturer at the University of Dakar, and I make lecturing on health geography. As you know, in Senegal, we have good process on adaptation, on climate change action, and we have achieved a lot of progress on adapting on climate change. And as you see, the first message is on the landscape of in climate action in Senegal. And what we could say is that in Senegal, we have a sectorial and territorial approach of climate change. That means that we have sectors who conduct adaptation action, but we have also at local level some institutions, some collectivities, territorial collectivities who conduct adaptation action. And we have also others other plan like the Senegal Emerging Plan, like the Sustainable Development Goal, which was joined to the climate action in Senegal. And what we can see also is that climate action in Senegal involves a range of institutions and stakeholders under the leadership of the National Climate Change Committee and also the Director of Environment, who have the lead on climate action, climate governance in Senegal. And as you see in the picture, we have the several actors and institutions who are working on climate in Senegal with different responsibility in different roles. And for locally led adaptation, as I say, we have an example on agriculture, an example on coastal area, but an example also on health. And what we can give as information, as message, is that the local communities, they have the capacity to identify some relevant action and also to implement action when they have the support of technical services, civil society, or no governmental organization. But they have knowledge on adaptation, and if they are well organized, they could implement adaptation action at local level. This is a good point. And what we noted is that indigenous adaptation practices and strategies are well aligned with the priority option of the NDCs and also the NAP, the National Adaptation Plan, but also those national policies like Senegal Emerging Plan or like Sustainable Development Goal. And yes, we have well alignment, but we have not good articulation at local level. If you see what the communities do is well aligned with the priority option of the NCC, but we have not articulation on with the action. And communities adaptation strategies demonstrates the add value of local adaptation, but in local level, in territory approach, and it is a good solution for more impact in the country in the area of climate action. And this we see some pictures on what the communities are achieving in the domain of agriculture. And we see in agriculture they use information services. They use also adaptive variety culture, and in the area of coastal they use local material in order to see how to adapt to coastal erosion. And if we take the example of health, we have early warning systems and vegetation protection and also housing adaptation to heat waves in the north of Senegal. And this, when I talk about alignment, here we have the practice in color yes. We have the adaptation practice from communities, but also we have the observed adaptation from the NDCs, and we see there is well alignment between local practice and also adaptation option at central level. And when we take the example of agriculture sector, coastal zone sector, and also the health sector. But what I say is, yes, there is alignment, but there is no actually good articulation between action on the ground and also action at central level. Experience on local-led adaptation present clear co-benefits for climate action and sustainable development goals with the contribution to communities' livelihood, resilience, health, and well-being condition improvement. We have also gas emission reduction, development of income-generated activities, and I think there is more add value from locally-led adaptation. Local-led adaptation has numerous potential for transformative adaptation and community resilience and sustainable development in communities, because you know, we could have option adaptation at national level, but when we need to have more impact, we need to have engagement and mobilization of communities for transformative adaptation. Communities' practices and adaptation strategies are not considered or accounted by the central government. And it is that what I say, there is arrangement, but there is no articulation between what we have on adaptation in central level and also in local level. And the main obstacle is how to access to finance, climate finance, but how to access to technical and scientific capacities in order to identify well and in order to plan and implement climate action at local level. This is important. And now we have for recommendation for key messages for policy decision makers in local and national level. We need to promote and develop climate governance and institution at the local level. I think that we have to domesticate, we have to decentralize adaptation action at local level to have more add value for climate action in Senegal, in order to see how to integrate well locally led adaptation in adaptation option of the NDCs and also the National Adaptation Plan, NAPS. We have also to encourage and support collaboration between research institutes, policymakers, civil society organizations, and local communities. And this is more important in order to see how to support support planification and planning and implementation of local adaptation, and how to join with NDCs in the central level. And we need also to invest to remove barriers related to technical capacity, but also to climate finance for local communities. And I think that if local communities have access to financing and they have access to capacity building, they could elaborate and implement easily adaptation action at local level for more sustainable of climate action in Senegal. And for the international communities, we have to promote the integration of local-led adaptation into the implementation of national and global climate goals. And this, I think, will be a good point with the support of the university, because I think we have to develop more communication, to develop more information on countries and government in order to take into account the need for local adaptation and how to support more communities in their goals to elaborate or to contribute to climate action in countries, in African countries. And we have also to adopt proactive and innovative way to finance and ensure access to local level actors. And we need also to see if GF, Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, or the Global Environmental Fund, they could give a common fund exclusively reserved to financing local adaptation initiative to make indigenous practices more sustainable and increase the efficiency and performance of climate action. And I think the most important barrier to remove is how to give capacity and financing to local communities in order to identify and implement adaptation action according to the local development planning, but also according to the national adaptation plan and NDCs in Senegal. This is my contact as a lecturer at the University of Dakar, and I would like again to thank you for giving us opportunity to share the work that we have achieved in Senegal. We have policy briefs, we have a report, and we have also documentation of depth dives and others document like framing papers and also analysis papers. And thank you again. Sorry for the French English. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahima, and thank you so much, Albert and Eloka, for your great presentations. I have to apologize for time, not for myself, because in these circumstances, we have very little time to cover a lot. So I've been very keen to make sure that we also have time for the panel discussion, but also for questions. So questions can also come from our audience. We would like to have this next session of our webinar very engaging. So please, our audience, send as many questions as possible. We might not be able to address them within the time frame that we have. We have only around 35 minutes left, but we promise that once the questions are with us and directed to certain researchers, then we will also get you some responses at a later time when if you provide your contact information. So thank you again for joining us. We've heard so much about what has happened in Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. And now perhaps this section of the webinar really looks to have a cross-country learning. So how can Nigeria learn from Ghana? How can Nigeria learn from Senegal, and the other way around? And to kickstart this conversation now with our three researchers and panelists, I would like to put forth this question to you, Eloka, and of course, same to you, Ibrahima and Albert. There is a lot of hype, of course, given the importance of locally led adaptation. But there's a saying that goes that charity begins at home. So we want the international community to take notice of the importance of locally led adaptation. How can we begin at home? How do we ensure that our policymakers within African countries who are facing enormous challenges from the impact of climate change take notice of this and move with it as a strategy or an approach for enhancing locally led adaptation, of course, tied to socioeconomic development? We know that our challenges are multifaceted and we need to handle them that way. To you, Eloka.
Thank you very much, Grace, for the question. I think across the country, country-wise, you could see the significance of this research we've done. Is very, very obvious that locally led adaptation within these countries, Nigeria, Senegal, and Ghana, are very, they are working. So to answer this question, I think the only thing we could do, or the starting point would be that we need to scale it up. There need to be an, a platform for all these viable projects or actions that the communities are doing, to be scaled up. So what we are asking for, or what I could propose, is that there need to be a synergy between the local communities and the local CSOs or NGOs who can help these communities to propagate their actions, to develop them very well. Okay, when we talk about shea butter processing in Ghana or erosion management in Senegal, we could see that they are doing very well. Or land degradation, what the local communities are doing within Nigeria, or fisheries, they are actually doing very well. So what they need, just to not to waste a lot of time in the question, is that there need to be an opportunity. There need to be an avenue where they could show the respective government agencies what they are doing and how it could be scaled up. By scaling them up, vulnerability, of course, decreases, and resilience. We build resilience by doing this. So I think I will, leave this for now while my colleagues continue. Thank you.
Ibrahima, over to you, please.
Thank you. What I could add is, if we take the example of Senegal, we have a lot of gaps on knowledge on locally led adaptation. And I think this initiative with EPRI opens the eyes on the need to identify several experiences on locally led adaptation, to document and to capitalize, and to see how to inform more policies on climate change adaptation in Senegal. And I think it will be a good add value in order to have more impact on climate adaptation in Senegal, on national policies, but also on achieving the sustainable development goals. We cannot let behind the communities with their vulnerability on climate change. And I think we need to develop more research in order to have scientific evidence to inform well climate change at global level. And I think it will be a good point with the research that we start in Senegal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahima. Albert, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. I think just a little in addition to what my colleagues have said is to, of course, emphasize your point that charity begins at home. And that will mean that our policies should be driven by local context in terms of knowledge, in terms of adaptation solutions that already exist, in terms of allocation and distribution of resources to the very down. I mean, these are some of the initial or entry points that can be taken to scale up locally led adaptation. We are talking about approach whereby, like I mentioned earlier on, a lot of the funding to implement actions are centralized. And when it happens that way, it means very little really goes to the people, the community that are at the forefront of the climate change action. And so scaling up this means that we need to be very deliberate and conscious to transfer resources to local areas, to engage, not just to consult, but to allow communities to be the driver in the planning, implementation, and then also discussion about interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You all appear to be advocates of locally led adaptation, which of course is what we wanted to make you to be in each country, because we know the value and importance of these kind of processes, especially at the local level, where both the international communities and also our national governments often, the end doesn't often stretch enough. But being a devil's advocate from this end, is there something that, are there gaps in locally led adaptations? And if there are gaps, which other approaches can be used to fill these gaps? Or how can we design processes that also actually fill the gaps that are presented in locally led adaptation approaches? Eloka, I'll start with you. And of course, give the example of Nigeria being such a big country with a huge population need of action in this area.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I would say that there are a lot of gaps that need to be plugged in terms of locally led adaptation in Nigeria. Just like I mentioned, we have a lot of, it seems we are just producing policy frameworks, adaptation policy frameworks. But these adaptation policy frameworks, when they were being developed, did we bring in the local communities? Did we follow the bottom-up approach or top-bottom approach? You know, so what the gap we need to fill here, one, the adaptation policy framework should be locally led. We need to give agency to the communities. They need to develop it themselves. They know where the shoe they are wearing is spending them from, so they can be able to plug the hole between problem A and problem B. So we need to allow the local communities to, to man the adaptation actions, to be able to take charge of what they are doing, and then to take the policies up to the national level, where it can now, the final processes will be arranged, and then allow them to take charge of what they are doing. That's number one, giving agency to local communities. Number two, we need to make sure that access to finance is equitable. It wouldn't just be, access to finance shouldn't just be from, national level alone. The subnational and the local communities also, we need to bring the stakeholders. Those people that are at the frontline communities need to partake on, the adaptation action. We need to release money to them. They need to have access to adaptation finance so that their work, because they know what they are doing, they know how they can plug the holes. The people at the national level may not be there. So with these 2 points, which I have seen, especially the fisheries and aquaculture sector is in dire need of adaptation finance, because their work is dependent, and the technology that is needed in that sector is very, very, complex. And yet we are importing fish products from overseas. The amount of fish products we are importing from overseas is much more higher than what the sector, the fishery sector, is giving us. That's number one. Then at the land degradation area, the local communities are not being able to go to the farms to produce, because their lands are no longer productive. They are losing their lands to gully and soil erosion. So when that is happening, the food sector is being, at the moment now we have high inflation. Food prices have gone up. So we need to allow the communities to man the adaptation, give them finance, and allow them to have agency over the adaptation process. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I will move quickly to Ibrahima now. Please keep your answers very short. We've now started getting questions from the audience, and we would like to address those as well.
Yes,
much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just 3 points. I think the first point on the gap is that we have low integration of indigenous practices and strategies in NDCs and NAPs, and I think we have to solve this kind of problems. Second is also the low integration of locally led adaptation of indigenous practices on the planning of policies at local levels. We have a lot of documents of development planning in the collectivities, but we have not the integration of climate change needs from the communities and from also the local practice in adaptation. And I think the other gap is how to connect local communities, local-led adaptation, to opportunities on climate change action, climate financing existing around the world or around the countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahima. Over to you, Albert, please.
Okay, yes, thank you. So the question is whether there are gaps in locally led adaptation. Yes, there are gaps. In fact, more serious gaps, despite the potential and also the role that they can play in delivering better adaptation outcome. For the Ghanaian case, I think one of the gaps that emerged has to do with issues about, for example, capacity to operate at a level that can really, how do you call it, that can bring greater impact. So the local VSA and processing group, for example, really want to do a lot of things. Of course, now they're able to through the activities and the group overcome some of the challenges that come with climate change, but they want to do more. So scaling up some of these locally led interventions sometimes become challenging because of financial reasons. There are sometimes also local politics and power play that often characterize who is giving what opinion and also shaping decision makings. There are other issues regarding capacity in terms of knowledge, in terms of even the practices. Some can have serious limitations. So these are just some of the gaps. But as I said, despite the gaps, there's really rare pathway for locally led adaptation as a pathway to implement our NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving from the charity begins at home to, of course, the role and responsibility of the international community, given how little African countries have contributed to the climate change crisis. From where you sit, what is the world not getting right about the challenges Africans are facing today in respect to climate impacts? And what should the world do better in order to support these communities, especially at the local level? Especially, I'm asking this question in the context of COP28. If you are given the mic at the negotiation table, as the last word is written down from the COP, what would you tell the president of COP28 needs to be done to support adaptation, mitigation, and other climate action process in those communities that you worked with?
Okay, thank you very much, Grace. I think I was going to mention that, and good enough you brought it to the fore. Yes, on the road to COP28, I think APRI should make a case, and also if I'm given an opportunity, I should make a case for my country and for Africa in general. Africa is at the receiving end of climate impacts, notwithstanding the fact that they are producing the proportion of greenhouse gas they are producing is very insignificant. So we have a lot of vulnerable communities here in Africa. Nigeria, most especially. In the north, we have land, massive land that you cannot use. So the thing we have to do is that we have to make a case for adaptation. Adaptation is the only thing we can, give to the vulnerable communities, to the frontline communities. And when I mean adaptation, we need to give them support, adaptation finance. We need to make sure that these communities can be able to stand on their own. The proportion of people in Nigeria that live below $1 or $2 per day, it seems to be on the increase. So we need to make sure that we equip them. There should be climate entrepreneurship. There are many things the youth can do, especially when the proportion of Nigerians who are below or between 18 and 35 years are very high. We are depending on the youth. So we need to equip the youth. We need to train them very well. So there need to be a very good training, and then equipping them with the right skills plus finance, making finance available. We may not just ask for everything, but but these are the very basic things so that people can be able to cope and people can be able to sustain themselves and then at least be able to, manage the climate impacts to the barest minimum. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ibrahima. I just want to repeat the question because I think we need to nail it. I'm asking we are here now, and it seems that we are not making as much progress as the magnitude of the problem, which is continually increasing. What exactly is the world not getting right about the climate change impacts in the continent of Africa and, of course, beyond small island countries? And how can we communicate that better to ensure that it's both understood, but the support that is needed to address the challenge is matching. The support is matching the magnitude and scale of the challenges that are being faced within local communities. So thank you.
Okay. And I think first we need to show the relevance and also the add value of local-led adaptation, and we need to build more evidence, more scientific evidence, and more evidence also from experience, local experience and practice, in order to see how we could make relevant achievement when we take when we consider local-led adaptation. And I think it's a good point for me. And we need also to see how to influence policies. It's not only climate change policies, but we need to influence social and economic policies, sustainable development policies, in order to see if we consider more local-led adaptation, we could have more add value for transformative adaptation. I think we need also to identify African leaders who could make up locally-led adaptation, who could influence, who could conduct negotiation with a governance system, climate change government system, in order to have the voice from communities, from locally-led adaptation. And the last is how to integrate locally-led adaptation and communities in the COP negotiation process. And I think we need to have specially events on the negotiation. It's not other part side events, but in the negotiation. We have the negotiation panels in there. And I think we need to have a part of local-led adaptation in the negotiation in COP, in order to show what is achieved and what is the add value and the relevance to consider local-led adaptation in governance process of climate change around the world, for island, for African countries, who are not achieving a lot of or more in adapting to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Albert.
Okay, so what do we really need? So first of all, it must be established that communities are already grappling with the effects of climate change. They are innovating, they are tackling this heads on. But of course, as we mentioned earlier, without challenges. So the challenges that confront the communities to be able to enable them to really be able to adapt well include finance. And we are saying that finance should not be centralized. It should really get down to subnational, to local levels, really invest in the places that matters. So that is one ask that we can ask from them. There should be a much more transfer of funds to support adaptation actions, especially at the local level. In Ghana, as I mentioned, that just about 4% of financing coming into the country goes into adaptation. And we need to really upscale and broaden this scale to really help communities to adapt. And then secondary, communities need some form of, capacity. As I said, they're already at the forefront, but these often come with gaps, as we mentioned earlier on. So we need to training, technology, access to infrastructure. These are some of the enabling factors that enable communities to adapt well. And so it is very important that the climate decisions really need to drive some of these enabling factors in order to enable communities to really do well. We need better policies as well. And that means that the negotiation policy, the negotiation processes, the politics that often characterize should be fair, it should be friendly, it should be on fair grounds to enable local communities have a say, to enable countries from the south also have a say in influencing these policies that help communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We also like to recognize the presence, of course, of our audience and some of the questions now already coming in. I would like to read out one of the questions and give you panelists an opportunity to respond. So the first question is, how best do you think successful locally led adaptations can be brought to the fore of global bodies with capacity and funding? For example, the Global Center for Adaptation. So I'll start with you, Ibrahima.
Yes, the question is how to consider local adaptation in
how to highlight,
yes.
how to, for example, bring out the inherent value of locally led adaptation to ensure more financing and support from global bodies, including the Center for Adaptation.
Yes, I think this needs more research action in order to, what I say earlier, to document well, in order to see what is the impact of local adaptation in community adaptation, and to see how to upgrade, to make it up, to scale up, and then I think we need also, if we have relevant knowledge and relevant information from local adaptation, and I think it will be more easy to remove the barrier from financing and also from technical and scientific capacity. But I think if when the stakeholders on climate governance know that communities have the capacity to implement well local adaptation, I think they could give opportunity to local communities to adapt, to elaborate policies at local level, and also to implement climate policies at local level. But it is depending to how we could show the add value and the impact from local-led adaptation for community adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to follow up on this question, because I think it's very important that we maybe even perhaps dig deeper into this, because from my experience over the last 2 years, and also, of course, engaging with stakeholders in Ghana, Nigeria, and Senegal, it was rather obvious and rather, for me, taking aback that local communities don't even recognize their role in adaptation processes. They are already doing very much, but there's no link, or there's no link between what they're doing and how they're contributing to national and the global level. How can we change that? Albert, over to you.
Okay, so let me go back with the first question. So in terms of how do we bring this to the fore? One of them is to really communicate, to really highlight that these practices, these solutions, and able to communicate and talk about it and raise awareness about this. When we're able to do that, then in terms of again traction, it becomes known, and then for the necessary support can be given. What role can communities play? Communities have always been adapting to different situations. And so sometimes it comes naturally that these things are seen as a normal way of doing things. But I think from the case studies that we have done, communities are increasingly recognized that they have a role. They have a role in the sense that they are really receiving the impact of the climate change more. And so in terms of engagement, it is one thing that is important for authorities to do that. Communities are calling for engagement. In some of the interactions that we had, several things happened that they don't even know about it. And so their role could be that they need to really advocate and raise awareness about what they offer, what they're able to offer, in terms of what they are doing, in terms of the innovative solutions that's already at place, in terms of the local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, practices that are available at the local level. When we are able to communicate these to the powers that be, to the authorities, local and international, I think it becomes one of the central roles that we can give communities, or communities themselves can bring to fore in addressing climate adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Eloka, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. So to answer that quickly, I think I'll start by saying that just like you also, agreed, communities have been adapting to climate change. They have been doing a lot of adaptation work and they don't even know it. Just like I found out in my own research that they are doing all this adaptation, carrying all these adaptation actions because they need to, sustain their means of livelihood. They need to sustain their means of livelihood. Now, what we need to do is that we need to increase, not just via communication. The government needs to now come in. We have community-based adaptation. We are not just hamlets are doing, or single house, houses are doing this adaptation, but call the community together and expand it. That's community. Then we have nature-based solutions too. How can we support? We have seen what you are doing and we think is very, very good, but see, can you add this and that? That is training them and telling them, because what you are doing is good. I think if you add this now, remember that most of these communities, they don't have their level of, training and technical capacities are very, very, very poor. So when we open, when we bring in nature-based solutions and community-based adaptation, we have to, there's a potential for, upscaling the adaptation just so that it goes on. Given what the question we have on globalizing local-led adaptation, we can start from the community level first and then expand into the global scene. So the important thing we need to do, identify, train.
We seem to have lost Eloka at the moment. I think we'll just proceed, and once he's able to join us, we will let him finish his statements. We are very close to the end of our very interesting webinar here, and I would encourage participants to put forth 1 or 2 questions. Eloka, are you back? Not yet. But we have a few questions in terms of logistics and how APRI is, for example, assisting with funding innovations. I think the role of APRI really is to conduct research and to provide data and opportunities for policymakers and other stakeholders to be able to know where the gaps are and where opportunities are. So we really are not a funding organization. What we try to do is generate funding to support research and policy engagement in different various African countries. You're very welcome to look at our website and see some of the work we are doing, both in the climate change program, but also in economy and society, in the trade area, but also in the geopolitical space. We also would like to bring to your attention that this is being recorded, and it's also being played on YouTube, so you can always have that. The presentations are also going to be present there as well. In addition to that, there's a wealth of information on this project and other project on our website. This is just an overview, a short synopsis of what we've been doing. A lot of it is on the website, and we want to continue to do this work in order for us to both highlight and try to communicate the value of local-led adaptation, both at the national, at the global, and at the local level. We have now a few minutes, and for this, I really would like to give our researchers the last word. And for this, I will provide this guiding question that I really hope you answer within not more than 1.5 minutes. We all saw that in our research, both in Ghana, Senegal, and Nigeria, the main motivation factor for actions at the local level was life and livelihood support. From your point of view, how can we take this information and ensure that it guides both national policymaking and global policymaking, such that the entry point for climate change is not the obvious or the dominant narrative of environmental protection, which is ideally very important, but pegging on what communities are motivated by, which is life and livelihood support, and of course, all other core benefits. What did you say? What do we need to do? How do we need to communicate this better? And how can we bring more leadership, as you, Ibrahima, mentioned, to this space, so that both the inherent value of local-led adaptation is communicated, but the local communities also get the support they need to actually both have these processes more effective and more sustainable to enhance climate change action at the local, national, and global levels. I'll start with you, Albert. You look ready for this question. You're muted.
Sorry. Very hard to summarize all the points into 1 minute, but so, I mean, first of all, as you rightly mentioned, livelihoods and lives are very critical elements into why and how people want to adjust their lives and respond to the impact of the climate change. And that is a crucial message that we need to send to policymakers to use this as one of the entry points. Because ultimately, climate change is about people. It's about their livelihood. It's about what they do and what they draw on to improve on their lives. And so it is very important that policies, strategies, and frameworks really look at different ways, not just to protect the environment, which of course you said is a very important thing, but also to make impact on livelihood. And doing that kind of means that policies really needs to be locally led. Policies need to be context specific. Policies needs to be differentiated to really take into account some of the diverse needs and aspirations that communities and people would have. And even more importantly, policies also needs to be much more inclusive in terms of the voices, in terms of the decisions, in terms of all the things that are shaping the policy. That is one way to show leadership, to really drive locally led adaptation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Albert. Over to you, Eloka.
Yes, I think we will not, take away the place of first, every person needs to survive. So that's why that livelihood, protecting lives and livelihood comes first. Then second, there are many associated co-benefits that these communities are, discovered that goes with locally led adaptation. Like in Nigeria, most of them discover that it's a means of connecting to, connecting to the community or getting access to clean water. So there need to be an in-depth, before all these locally led adaptations need to come up, there need to be an in-depth study for each of them. For that, before upscaling need to go on. First, I think local led adaptation actions need to be context specific. What works for zone A may not work very well for zone B. So it is important, just like my colleague said, that apart from context specific, we need to make sure that the policies are very well aligned, and then they can benefit not just the communities, the frontline communities, but also the people carrying out the actions, so that when it comes to, it can from national, it can go from local communities, state level, and then up to the national level. I believe I've made some input of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ibrahima, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you. I think first we need to communicate, to inform on local adaptation. We need to know today what is the add value of the community knowledge on adaptation, and we need to communicate, to interact with scientific communities, with technical communities, with policy decision making. And I think we need to have this kind of action. We need also to recognize the role of local adaptation in climate action officially, and to put it in NDCs, and put it also in NAP, in country NAPs. The last point is how to support institution, research institution, academic institution to integrate the need of local-led adaptation research, and to work with communities and to highlight the best on adaptation from the communities, and to show what is the way to integrate it in climate action, definitely in Senegal. And I think we need to build more evidence for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we are coming to the end of our webinar. Very special thanks to our researchers from Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal. We cannot thank you enough, both for being part of this important work that we've done for the last 2 years. But I also would like to extend a special thanks to our participants who are joining us from all over the world. We've had already 100 views as we proceeded, and we've stayed with a lot of people along the way. So we would like to extend our utmost appreciation to you, and also wish you a very good afternoon, morning, wherever you are. But before you go, I would still encourage you to go to the website, APRI website, to be able to really get the gist and the extent of the work that has been done, but also to use it to do your research, and to also spring out of this work that has been done, to start your own research at the local level and whatever you might be. I would also like to say that we are preparing now to move into the COP. APRI will be highly present at COP28 this year, both in the first week and second week. If you're joining us at COP28, please visit our side events. One of them will be exactly on this project. We'll be launching our synthesis report that really pulls out the lessons learned from each of the 3 countries into a synthesis report, and of course a panel discussion as well, highlighting some of the lessons and where we are at the moment and where we need to go. It's exactly 4 p.m. And with this, I would like to wish you all the best, and thank you very much for being our guest and also for being our panelist. So thank you, and have a nice evening, morning, wherever you are.